All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is Nithin Ramachandra from the NR Hour Sports Show. This is episode 811. I'm joined by a really special guest. His name is Mike Ferrin. He knows a lot about the game of baseball. He's a broadcaster for the Arizona Diamondbacks, and he's also an MLB Network radio host. It's truly an honor to have him on the show today. He's been covering the game over 20 years, a lot of experience. And first of all, Mike, how are you and your family doing so far during this tough situation? And how's everything in Arizona?
Everything is good here. Yeah, we're doing all right. So it's weird when you said 20 years out loud. That made me feel old all of a sudden.
Sorry about that.
No, no, we're good. It's we're starting to get to we have two summers in Arizona. We have
Oh,
first summer, we have monsoon season, and so we're getting into first summer. So we're starting to get our 105-degree days, and probably going to get up to 120s in the next couple of weeks. So
wow.
everything is good.
Wow, that's crazy. So I want to start off with your childhood growing up, and when did you realize that you wanted to be in the sports industry? When was the first time that you got interested in sports, and when did you start like having using a microphone and getting into those broadcasting stuff? And did you have a role model growing up in the broadcasting world?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say that I probably, I got into baseball when I was like 6 or 7 years old. Probably, I would say, yeah, probably seven, right around then. I mean, the first memories I have of really, locking in and watching games are probably the summer of 1983, and so, that to me is when I first started to get into it and just fell in love with baseball right away. And my parents aren't huge sports fans. My mom is actually a bigger sports fan than my dad is.
Oh, wow.
But for some reason, I just gravitated towards baseball. I think my uncle liked it, my grandfather liked it, my mom liked it, and so that's when I kind of focused on it. And as I got into playing other sports like basketball and football growing up, I was probably a better football player than any of the other sports, but that's just because I was a big dude, and I couldn't hit. And as soon as I realized I couldn't really hit, that's when I started thinking about other ways to be around baseball. So I'd say by the time I was really fortunate. By the time I was in high school, or maybe even a little bit before, I had a pretty good idea of what I wanted to do because I knew that baseball was my great passion, and I've been fortunate to be able to follow it to this point. And it's in terms of role models growing up. I mean, I think the person that I grew up watching and listening to the Cubs and White Sox on the radio and television, and so I would say guys like Vince Lloyd, I think Dwayne Statz, who does the Tampa Bay Rays games, I think he'd certainly be a huge influence on me. I think probably to a little bit lesser extent, Harry Carey was. Those were the guys that I think I really Joe McConnell, who was doing the White Sox and Bears at that point, and probably most recently, he was the voice of the Purdue Boilermakers and passed away about 6 or 7 years ago. Those were the guys that I think that were really probably the most influential on me as a kid. And then, as I got a little bit older, it was actually a talk show host named Spike O'Dell in Chicago who always seemed to be having a really good time, and so I took that from him.
Yeah. So obviously, take me back to your process being trying to be a broadcaster, and obviously back in the day, you guys didn't have microphones, and but what did you use to when you were younger to utilize covering games, and what did you start with?
Well, I mean, I started probably by acting. I mean, I'd say that was probably what I did more than anything is I performed. My mother was is a professional musician and vocalist, and my grandfather, her father, had been a pit musician, and so we were used to performing. And so that's kind of how I would say that I got started with it at a young age. And it wasn't until college really that I started, focusing on broadcasting for a career. I think more than anything, working in that and competing in speech competitions and stuff like that helped to build the skills that I needed.
Hmm. So obviously, when you went to high school and college, what were the main things that you learned as a broadcaster in high school and college? And did you get to cover any games when you were in high school and college?
Yeah. So when I was in high school, I was still playing sports a little bit, and then I started competing in speech as well, and I took that into college as well. So I was the captain of the speech team. I went to a small school in Dubuque, Iowa, called Loras College. You may have heard of it. They often call Harvard the Loras of the East, and so it's a really prestigious institution. But so I think that's when I really started getting into broadcasting, and I actually started. My first job was as a classic rock disc jockey. So that's where the start came. And I did a little bit of calling games when I was in college, not a whole lot. I think I did a football game maybe. And, I did a baseball game over the course of the summer one year when I was back home that was running on like community access TV. But really, my first play-by-play opportunity was doing juniors hockey, and that was shortly after I'd graduated college, and that's when, my first opportunity came, and I was calling games for the Dubuque Fighting Saints in the United States Hockey League.
So let me ask you this. I think this is an important question. Like as a broadcaster, how important is it for people to cover multiple sports and getting different experiences and learning different aspects of each sport? So whenever you get the opportunity to stick with one sport that you already know a lot about the sport. So how important is it just to cover multiple sports?
Yeah, I would say that it's even more important than covering multiple sports. I would say having multiple jobs in the industry has been really helpful for me. So I think there are a lot of the things that I learned and utilized as a disc jockey that I take into being a broadcaster. One of the best lessons I learned, my first boss in radio, Paul Hemmer, told me, if you do one good bit and one so-so bit an hour, people will think you're brilliant. And that was, you're doing like 20-second breaks, right? Between Peter Frampton and REO Speedwagon, right? Like it kind of sticks with you. And I think it actually takes a lot of pressure off you as a host or an announcer, in that you don't have to be perfect or try to make everything ideal. You just have to, hit what you're going to hit, but just try and go about putting together a creative and entertaining product. And I think that there's probably stuff from that and about being concise that I took from being a disc jockey, that I use more now, especially in play-by-play, than I did just my knowledge of sports growing up or having a knowledge of a lot of sports. And I think just anything you can do to gain knowledge of how an industry works, I think is powerful in helping you try and develop a sound.
So I want to get to your Diamondbacks opportunity first. And how did that come about? And how grateful are you that the Diamondbacks gave you the opportunity to be the broadcaster?
Yeah, so in about 2014 or so, Derek Hall, who's the president and CEO of the Diamondbacks, came to our studios in DC. I was working for Sirius XM then. I started there in 2007. And we were having a conversation in the studio, and he said, "Hey, when are you going to come work for us someday?" And he'd heard on the radio that, I always wanted to live in Phoenix. I grew up in the Midwest, and I hate winters. And so like Arizona has always been one of the places I wanted to be. And so I was like, "When are you going to have me?" And so we were just kind of joking around about that. And during the postseason of 2015, I think just at the end of covering the National League Championship Series when they announced that they were going to have an opening. And things moved pretty quickly from there. I reached out to Derek right away. He connected me with Scott Geyer, who's my boss, who's the vice president of broadcasting here. And they had an opening for, basically the pre and post game host and a fill-in play-by-play announcer. And I had wanted to do major league games my entire life. I'd done some minor league, leading up to this, and just wanted to get an opportunity. And so that was in November of 2015. They offered me the job as I was flying home from Phoenix, which was really cool. And I got to shed a little bit of a tear on the flight home with my wife. And 6 years later, I'm still here and grateful to have the opportunity to be a big league announcer for sure.
It's like being called up from the minors to the majors.
A little bit, yeah. It feels a little bit like that.
Yeah. So for you in the minors, though, what was it like just covering the young players and seeing them grow and trying to get to their goals, which is the majors, obviously. So what was it like just seeing them, the young players growing up?
So I had kind of a unique experience in that I wasn't like fully embedded with a minor league team. I was doing games for Bowie, which is the AA team for the Orioles, while I was still working at Sirius. So I would be doing like the late night show. I would do a minor league game and then hustle in the car to do post game for Sirius XM. And I did, a fair amount of the home games. I didn't work every game. But so it was cool to see guys come through that league. Like the first year that I was in it, guys like Jose Iglesias and Adani Echeverria and Eric Thames and were some of the names, Zach Britton, those were guys that were all playing in the Eastern League that first year I was there, and guys that ended up having good big league careers. Anthony Rizzo was with Pawtucket, and Brandon Belt was with, Richmond in that time. And so, that was neat. I mean, it was really fun to watch those guys develop and to get to know those guys. And I think too, like I was fortunate in that I had worked in a big market before, but I think in terms of just like learning how to act in a clubhouse every day, who to talk to, the way to carry yourself, I think that's important too. And so I helped to reinforce a lot of those things that I'd learned in those couple of years that I worked with Bowie.
So before we get back to the Diamondbacks, I want to ask you about the Sirius XM MLB Network Radio, and what's that experience been like so far for you? And obviously, you work with great people like Jim, and there's a lot of great hosts on that show. And what's it like working on the network?
It's been my favorite job that I've ever had. I started there in 2007, so I've been here it'll be 14 years next month.
Oh, wow.
That I've been there, and they're tremendous employers. They're really great people to work for and work with, and I couldn't ask for more. I mean, I've been fortunate in that I've gotten to spend the last, nearly 15 years of my professional life covering the sport that I love the most. And they've made that a possibility. And they've also, allowed me to have opportunities when I've earned them to move up the ladder. And I'm extremely grateful for all of that. It's really a terrific place to work. And, some of the people that I have been there since the beginning of the channel, which was 2005, are still there. And so, working with those guys and like Jeff Joyce started about 2 weeks before I did, who's still a host on the channel. Jim Duquette started a few months right after I did. Casey Stern got there about a year and a half after I did. Like, we have this huge group of people that have all been together for a long time, and the people behind the scenes have been there, 10 plus 15 years. And that's also really cool. And so we have this really great family dynamic to it.
Yeah, and you guys have former MLB players on there too as a host, and it's just amazing. And you guys do a great job. And how do you balance it out when you're calling, obviously broadcasting with the Diamondbacks?
Yeah.
And sometimes does it like conflict, or does your schedule work out in a certain way?
Yeah, so I mean, it conflicts from times now and again. I mean, a lot of times you'll hear me off during the day when the Diamondbacks have a day game. I have to focus on that. In terms of other conflicts, knock on wood, I haven't really had one yet. I mean, both sides have been pretty great at working with me, and that I'll try to be as honest as possible about things. I mean, I also am pretty open about the fact that I'm national radio's #1 Diamondbacks fan too. So obviously as an employee of the team. So I think from that standpoint, it's worked out pretty well. But there are some time conflicts with them, and that's fairly easy to work through. The more difficult part is there are a lot of late games, and my show is on early on the West Coast. And so, sometimes there may not be a Diamondbacks game and I'm taking a day off, and it's just to get caught up on sleep. So now the dogs still get me up at 4:00 in the morning, but I can go back to bed for a couple hours as opposed to, being up at 5 and starting to prep for a radio show.
So I want to talk to you about the Diamondbacks. So obviously you started in 2014-15, and so seeing the development of the roster, obviously they competed in 2015, and most of the players are gone now, like Paul Goldschmidt is obviously with the Cardinals, and they're going through a struggle now with the rebuilding. And what's it been like though, seeing the development of the roster and the way they're building it right now?
Yeah, so I got here in 2016. That was the first year I was here, and after that 2016 team was a disappointment because we had such high expectations for it, because they were coming off a good, like a 2015 that you feel like were really getting you to build towards something competitive. And then 17, they won the wild card and felt really good about the direction. And since then, they've had good teams in 18 and 19. Last year was a major disappointment because I really feel like if the season had played out over 162 games, their finish would have been different. And this year, it's, everyone can make injury excuses, but I just saw some stuff with Baseball Prospectus that shows that the Diamondbacks have lost about 10% of their projected production from the number of players that have been injured. I think 4 of the top 6 starters are currently on the injured list. At one point, they lost 5 members of their starting lineup at one time. And so it's been a really challenging year. And as we talk right now, they're in the midst of a 17-game road losing streak, which is the longest in the majors in 11 years. And so it's been tough. I mean, there's definitely talent on the roster, and there's some, excellent players. And, the out of what's been this, really rough start has been some silver linings, and that guys like Josh Rojas and Pavin Smith have established themselves as regulars. And even before that, and he's hurt now, but Taylor Widener looks like he's going to be a key rotation arm going forward. And so there are some positives out of it. It just has not collect, for whatever reason this season. And so it's been a real bummer.
No, you guys have a great manager though, coming from Boston, and he's a heck of a manager. And but I love Arizona, the team. The ballpark is amazing, and having that pool in the back where the fans can hang out, that's amazing. But what's it like just to be in that ballpark, seeing that, and the fan base is amazing there.
Well, I think when the roof is open, it's a great park. I mean, it's really, really, really nice. And the pool is kind of fun. I mean, everybody has a pool. That was one of the things that I learned in moving to Arizona is like, it's really easy to buy a house that has a pool or rent a house that has a pool. So like I'm staring at our pool right now. I talked to you looking over the camera, and it's not like we're rich. It's like just part of what happens like in the houses here. So that's kind of cool. Like, and I think, listen, D-backs fans are great. Like there's a lot of people that are from other places that have transplanted to Arizona, and they've adopted the team as their own. And, they're not unlike, a broadcaster that gets hired by a team that you grew up someplace else, and then you end up following that team and falling in love with it. And so I think that's a one of the things that I really appreciate about Diamondbacks fans. And you're right, and do have a manager that I really love. I love Torey Lovello. I think he's a tremendous human being. He's just a real prince of a guy, and I think his players have just such respect for him, and he's just like, I can't say enough about him as a human being. He's just a really great person.
Yeah, so I'm sure you guys obviously talk about this on the Sirius XM show. And what are your overall thoughts so far on the season? And we're already halfway through; it's going so fast. And do you have any surprise? Are you surprised with any teams that are exceeding expectations right now?
Yeah, I would say the Red Sox and the Cubs kind of fit that mold. I think those are 2 teams that I'm surprised at. I mean, the Red Sox, I felt like they were going to be better, but not to this level. They've been playing extremely well. They're sitting in second place in their division, and they've gotten pretty good pitching this year, which I think was the biggest surprise with that. So I would put them at the top of that list. I think that, the Cubs were a team that, they have the lowest average fastball velocity of any rotation in the majors, and the fact that they're, atop their division tied with Milwaukee is pretty interesting. Chris Bryant has been sensational to this point, and they've played better offensively. And I think we'll get a better feel for them over the course of the next month. So I would put those 2 as maybe the biggest surprises. Well, in San Francisco, I mean, listen, the Giants had the best record in the National League, and I thought they were going to be better than a lot of people felt they were going to be, just having watched them the last 2 years a lot. But I never could have predicted that they'd win, 63% of their games for the first 2 months. And they have an excellent rotation, and their offense has been very good. So if they can withstand some of these injuries that they've suffered now, I'm really curious to see how that plays out with them in one of the wild card playoff berths, and in what looks like it could be a 3-team race in that division.
Yeah, and a lot of crazy things are happening, and I'm a Yankee fan, and we're on the downside right now. And how concerned are you with the Yankees? And is there a chance that there's a possibility we can miss the playoffs and not make it? And also, I've been hearing rumors that Kendall Marte from the Diamondbacks could possibly join the Yankees in the trade. But What are your thoughts so far on the Yankees?
Well, let's just start with the Yankees. I mean, the issue has been offense, which is not something that anybody anticipated was going to be the problem. They just have not been a good offensive team. And I think when you've got guys like Torres and LeMahieu that you were counting on to slug, I think, not slugging, that's going to be an issue. Now, both of those guys are guys I would bet on the back of their baseball card. And so I think there's going to be some internal improvement there. And the fact that they haven't had Luke Voit basically for the entire season has been a huge issue. So I would not be surprised if they go out and address first base. Their pitching has been pretty solid. Their bullpen's still good. They're going to get Severino back in, the next 6 weeks or so. So I think that they're pretty well positioned from a pitcher standpoint. And they're in a tough division, but I do think that they're capable of making a run. They may not end up making the playoffs, but I think they'll be in the mix for it. As for Marte rumors, don't buy any of them. I wouldn't buy any of them. Marte is signed through 2022 with a pair of really affordable club options. The Diamondbacks are not interested in tearing all the way down to the studs. That's not the way that Mike Hazen, the general manager, and the organization do things. It's very difficult to find a team that has players that match up in order to make a deal for Marte, because he is that combination of elite talent with an extremely affordable contract that fits in anybody's system. So I don't think that I think the likelihood of Marte getting traded is extremely slim. And so I would not put any stock into that. And anytime you hear Marte's name come up in rumors, I think there's another Marte that's much more likely to be traded, and that's Starling from the Marlins, I think, because he's a free agent after the year. And I don't think Miami's in the end going to be able to finish at the top of that division. But I would not put a whole lot of stock into any talk you hear about Cattell.
Oh, okay. Interesting. And I want to ask you this: how does it work for you? Obviously, you do the show from home, and then you go to the dine. Obviously, you're allowed back in the stadium in the broadcasting booth. So you do the Sirius XM show from the house, right? Obviously.
Yep. Right where I'm sitting right now. Yeah, I do that in the morning there. So I can show you. I got my little radio set up right there.
Oh wow.
So yeah, I do that, and then I go to the ballpark for the games.
So what advice would you give to young people or young kids or that are trying to be in the broadcasting world, or even athletes too? What advice would you give them that are trying to reach their goals?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's kind of a broad question. I mean, I think more than anything, make sure that you're passionate about what you want to do. I think passion goes a long way. I think it's very important, because when there are going to be rough days, and there are going to be a lot of rough days where you're either not making much money or don't feel like you're advancing as quickly as you want, or, any number of things, you have to have something that continues to drive you. And so I think the passion to do this is very important. And I think that that's kind of universal. I think regardless of what industry you end up being in, you want to be passionate about the things that are going to be part of your life. And so I think it's really important to know that you have the drive and the inner fire to do what you want to do, and this is what you want to do. And if you don't feel that fire, that's okay. You can find something else. You can still be a sports fan or a sports player on the weekends or whatever. It is a lot easier to do this job if it's something that you really love, because there are going to be a lot of frustrating moments along the way, just like with any other industry.
So for yourself, how grateful are you right now to be in this position and be able to play, cover the game? That this is your passion, and to be able to reach your goal and cover, have a long career here, experience over like I said, 20 years of experience of covering baseball. So how grateful are you to be in this position?
Yeah, I'm grateful, but I also am, and I don't want this to come across the wrong way. There was a lot of hard work that I've put in to get to this point. So I'm grateful that people believe in me without a doubt, but I also recognize more than anything that I have put in a lot of hours and work and preparation to get to this point. And that I'm more grateful. I'm very proud of myself that it has paid off in that regard, if that makes sense. I hope that doesn't come across as arrogant. Oh, no. It's not intended to be that way, because I do think that we spend a lot of time talking about people being grateful for
Yeah.
opportunities that other people give them, but don't look at the fact that they're the ones that have earned it.
Yeah.
And so, and then that's not to say like I've earned it over somebody else or whatever. I'm grateful that people, think that's who I am and that's part of my talent. But I also am, I'm proud of myself for being able to achieve the goals that I set out to.
So now we do this fun little segment on the show. It's called a rapid fire segment. Now, you ready for this?
Okay, all set.
All right. Do you like the new the extra innings rule, man on second, starting at the 10th inning?
Kinda. I don't know that I love it in the 10th inning, but I can certainly see its utility beyond the 10th. How's that?
So, what was your most memorable call on an Arizona Diamondback game, and also who what would you say the best broadcaster out there right now?
Let's see. My most memorable call, probably I did the Madison Bumgarner 7-inning no-hitter this year, so that's probably the most memorable one. Unfortunately, we weren't in the ballpark for it because it happened in Atlanta, so I was yelling at my TV screen. But that would probably be the most memorable. In terms of, it's hard for me to pick one broadcaster that I say that's the guy. The guy that I gravitate towards if they're doing a game is probably Jason Benetti with the White Sox, who I think is just, I think he's brilliant, and I think he's brilliantly funny. And he also happens to be a swell dude.
Yeah, he says put it on the ball, right? That one?
No, that he replaced the put it on the board guy.
Yeah. Favorite food?
Favorite food. I'm a big barbecue guy. So I've got 4 different cookers in my backyard. So if it's smoked meat, I'm your guy.
Funniest person that you work with right now?
Funniest person that I work with right now. One of our producers, Brady Gardner, I would say is definitely the funniest that we work with.
So I'm sure you watched the Yankees Red Sox game last night, and do you think the MLB should do something with the umpires, because that was clearly a ball to a door? I don't know if you saw it last night.
Yeah,
that was a ball. I don't know.
No, I think. What are they going to do? I mean, that missed calls are part of baseball, So I don't think that there's anything that changes. That's not probably even the most egregious missed call that we've seen over the course of this year. They are testing, an automated strike zone in the low minors, and I think that's going to be a reality within a couple of years. But I don't, it gets more play because it's Yankees, Red Sox, and Yankees fans. No offense, but Yankee fans tend to get upset about everything a little bit more. But I don't think you can do anything other than, it's a bad call. Bad calls happen. That's, if you want human element to be in umpiring, then you have to live with those.
Yeah. So speaking of no hitters, what are your thoughts so far? We have like 6 no hitters, and the Bumgarner one should be counted. I think there should be 7, but they say 6. But what are your thoughts so far on those 6 no hitters?
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy to see that. It's not wholly unprecedented. I think 7 is our record for a season of 7 9-inning no hitters, and that's happened a couple of different times. They are kind of random occurrences, so like it wouldn't be crazy to see, maybe 1 more no-hitter the rest of the way, or no more no-hitters the rest of the way. So I think it's just kind of like, it's kind of unique, and it's kind of neat that we've had it. I think what's really nuts about it is that there are 3 teams that have been no-hit twice, right? Yeah. So Texas, Seattle, and Cleveland have each been no-hit twice.
Wow.
Think about that. That's so all 6 of the 9-inning no-hitters happened against 3 teams, and all of them in the American League.
Hey, and one of them is from Corey Kluber from us. So
yeah.
So what would you say your most memorable winter meetings you've been a part of?
Let's see. Most memorable winter meetings. Like most memorable winter meetings moment, or overall winter meetings?
Moments and big free agent signing.
Well, let's see. The most memorable winter meetings moment was probably the time the guy fell into the fountain in Dallas. I was there at the Wyndham when that happened. I wasn't very far from him either when that happened. That was pretty funny. That's a really good one. That, or Corey Schwartz, who runs the stats for MLB.com challenging Brady Anderson to a foot race after I had been having dinner with Corey, and Brady Anderson had been one of his favorite players and got introduced to him by somebody. And I don't know how it came up, but they decided to race. And so they raced outside the Swan and Dolphin in Orlando, and Brady smoked them. So it was like barefoot, no, not even warming up. So that was really those are probably my two favorite winter meeting moments. In terms of favorite winter meetings overall, the first one in San Diego. So that was the year that there were a bunch of trades, and I think it was Andrew Friedman's first year with the Dodgers. So that's when they traded Matt Kemp to San Diego. Padres made a ton of moves. Jimmy Rollins got traded to the Dodgers. John Lester signed with the Cubs. There was all sorts of stuff that happened. It was a really busy winter meetings. Plus, it was the first one in San Diego. And so generally at the winter meetings, you're like trapped in the hotel, but everybody actually went outside. And so it was really nice. That I think is my favorite winter meetings, without a doubt.
Yeah, speaking of the guy falling into the fountain, intentional talk on MLB Network, I think they sometimes replay that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's the funniest. That's the funniest one. And but for you though, what are you most looking forward to seeing the Diamondbacks improve on this year? Obviously, we don't know if they're going to. They might not make the playoffs, but seeing the growth and maybe potentially seeing some call-ups this year.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think seeing growth of guys like John Duplantier in the rotation when Widener comes back. Zach Gallen is going to be back from injury in the not too distant future, and Gallen is a pretty terrific starter. So watching those guys, seeing Dalton Varsho get another opportunity at some point, I think I'm excited about that. I think just kind of the growth of the young guys. And listen, I love watching Ketel Marte play. He's one of my favorite players, and if not my favorite player to watch. And so, getting a chance to see him play every day is incredibly worthwhile because he's a spectacular talent.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on Jason DeGrom? 0.62 ERA, nasty stuff. Throws 100 miles per hour throughout the 9 how long? But whenever he gets out, but this guy, should we lock him for a third straight Cy Young award?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. Should we lock him in now? I mean, there's still a lot of baseball to be played, but if this were a year ago, our season would be over now, and then I think we could give it to him. But there's another 100 games to go, and I definitely think he's got a great chance at it. I mean, this is as good a stretch as you've ever seen anyone having, any pitcher have. So I think DeGrom is probably the favorite. But I just had a chance to see Corbin Burns pitch yesterday, and he is. I mean, every bit as filthy. And I would not bet against him either being in the discussion at the end of the season because he really is. And there's not a whole lot of guys that throw, well, there's been like two in baseball history that throw 96-mile-an-hour fastballs that make a left turn as they get to home plate because his cut fastball is so good. And he just really can flummox hitters. So, yes, I think DeGrom is probably the favorite, but I would say keep an eye on Corbin Burns.
So a couple more things before I let you go. And what's it like being on these platforms, sharing your stories, and going on other people's shows just to share your story?
Yeah, I mean it's great. Like I love the opportunity. I love being able to help people out, especially young aspiring broadcasters. I think that's one of our responsibilities. There were people who helped me when I was young and get into the industry and improve. And I think that's really an important part of what we do. So I think, being able to have that opportunity is really important. But otherwise, I mean, it's just like, listen, I get to cover baseball for a living. Like it can't be too bad, right? Like, so I get to call baseball games. I get to talk to baseball players. I get to talk to coaches. I get to talk to executives. I get to create a 3-hour talk show every day that focuses only on baseball. I mean, listen, my life's pretty good.
And so do you see any like big trades happening this year in the trade deadline or minor trades?
Yeah, I think that there's probably going to be some movement. I would think that there's going to be a little bit of movement overall. I think, a guy like Trevor Story is going to be of interest to teams. And I think, I know there's been a lot of talk about Max Scherzer being moved, and I'm pretty skeptical. But if the Nationals did decide that they were okay with it, I mean, I think he would certainly be a name that people would be interested in. So I think that there will probably be I think we already have a pretty good list of sellers, and if the trade market wants to open up quicker, I think there are teams that are probably motivated to move players, and I would not be surprised if you start to see that happening in the not too distant future. And I think that lends itself to big trades. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's more than like one or two significant names that get moved. That seems to be the biggest. Every year that's kind of like the max when you get to it.
So the last two things here. Our team is part of this foundation called the Hugh Jackson Foundation. He's a former NFL coach. Now he's an offensive coordinator at Tennessee State with Eddie George, and we're trying to help him prevent human trafficking, making sure the community is safe and the children stay safe. And it's so horrible out there what I'm seeing, and we're really grateful to be part of this foundation. And I'll send you the page so you can go check it out.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and the last thing here. Would you like to say anything to all the nurses, doctors, and essential workers right now?
Well, incredibly grateful to what they have done to try and keep us safe over the last, now 15 months and 16 months. It has been a really long year for everyone. And I think for them being on the front lines of battling COVID-19 and the risks that they were willing to take to try and save people's lives, I don't think we can thank them enough. So yeah, I absolutely thank you for everything that you've done and you continue to do to try and help us to reach a better tomorrow.
Yeah, well said. And there it is. That wraps up episode 811 for the NR Hour Sports Show with Mike Ferrin. He's an Arizona Diamondbacks broadcaster, and you can find him on Sirius XM, MLB Network Radio. Go follow him on Twitter. He does a great job in the game of baseball. And man, this is truly an honor. Thank you again for coming on the show. Keep up the great work. I know you guys are busy over there. Good luck the rest of the season. And I love what you guys do on Sirius XM, and you never stay safe.
My pleasure, Nathan. Thank you so much. You stay safe too.
Thank you.